I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. Oh, I have a dream that one day my 4 children will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Oh, I have a dream today. I'd love to jump into the story of Joseph, but I know that before we jump into the story, there's something very important we need to first do. Location. Context. So we find ourselves in the book of Genesis. The book begins with God creating the heavens and the earth. God then creates man. Man sins. Death enters the picture. As part of God's redemption plan, He creates a covenant with Abraham, promising to be his God and to create for himself a people. By the end of the book, Joseph dies, and before he dies, he gives instructions about his bones to be carried out of Egypt, foreshadowing the Exodus and the continuing of God's redemption plan. We find ourselves here at the story of Joseph, a young teenage boy whose God's purposes are clearly seen in his life and his story. Okay, now I can say, let's jump right in. Whoop, whoop. Jacob lived in the land where his father had stayed, the land of Canaan. This is the account of Jacob's family line. Joseph, a young man of 17, was tending the flocks with his brothers, the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and he brought their father a bad report about them. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons, because he had been born to him in his old age, and he made an ornate robe for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. He said to them, "Listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it." His brothers said to him, "Do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us?" And they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he had said. Then he had another dream, and he told it to his brothers. "Listen," he said, "I had another dream. This time the sun and the moon and the 11 stars were bowing down to me." When he told his father as well as his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, "What is this dream you've had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you?" His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. So the title of our story today, or our passage, is "I Have a Dream Because God Gave It to Me." And we're going to look at 3 points. Firstly, the man and his heart. Secondly, the man and his family. And thirdly, the man and his God. We are first introduced to Joseph as a 17-year-old young man. So in many ways, when we look at Joseph, he is on the brink of manhood. And he's out in the flocks, tending the sheep, looking after the animals, just like David. So Joseph, as this shepherd boy, we get the sense that he is very tender and very caring. But we also get the sense from the passage that he's stern and just, because it says he gave a bad report to his father. So even though he is the youngest of all of his brothers, Joseph is the one who is willing to be mature and honest and open, and he has a good sense of what is right and wrong. Next, we are introduced to the character of Jacob. Now, in the passage, it calls him Jacob and Israel. So if you know the history, Israel is the name that God had given him once he had wrestled the Lord and overcame. The 12 sons that he will go on to have are not only the sons of Israel in a kind of this my dad kind of way, but also in a figurative way. They are the heads of the 12 tribes of Israel. So the passage tells us that gonna make that mistake a lot. The passage tells us that Jacob loved Joseph so much more than his other sons. And he loved him because he was a son of his old age. So Jacob was kind of acting like a grandfather towards Joseph, spoiling him, showering him with love. And the brothers did not reciprocate this love. They didn't understand why their father treats Joseph this way, but he treats them in a very different way. Now, if you know the story of Joseph, of Jacob, if you know the story of Jacob married 2 wives, 2 women. The first woman he married was Leah, and the second woman was Rachel. And Leah was the one he didn't love, and he had quite a number of sons with Leah. But Rachel was the one he did love. And Joseph is the very first son of Jacob and Rachel. So it's the son with his sweetheart. He actually gives Joseph a technicolored, it says technicolored in these movies, but in the text it says a richly ornamented robe, and it is stunning compared to what his brothers obviously had. And his brothers are furious. They cannot understand why is it that their brother is loved in this particular way. And so the text says, are unable to say even one kind word to Joseph. I don't know if you've ever been in a relationship with someone where you cannot say, they cannot say a kind word to you. So if you say something good, there's something else that comes back. If you say something bad, there's something else that comes back. But what always comes back is not positive, it's not encouraging. It's like you really always have to walk on eggshells with this person. This is very much the story of Joseph and his brothers. I mean, to them, he is the snitch. In our country, we'd say a pimpalar or a pimpi. He must learn his lesson. He must know his place. He is young. Why is he acting so, why is he so trying to, control us or complain about us, this loved boy. And he's got these 2 characters, this character that loves him, his father, so much, and this character that hates him, his brothers. The intensity of this hatred is choking pretty much the whole family at this stage. My pastor always says, our family relationships come and teach us about who we are, and God always gives us parents and siblings that are right for us, because we would never learn some of the lessons we're supposed to learn besides from learning it from these particular type of parents and siblings that we have.
I'm Joseph, the firstborn of my mother, loved of my father, hated of my brothers, the shepherd of my flock, the dreamer, the slave, the fleer, the prisoner, and spoiler alert, the man who would feed the world with African resources to preserve the remnant of God's people, who would bring forth his message not only to the lost sheep of Israel, but also the world for his glory.
So many people will call Joseph Joseph the dreamer. But dreaming is not something that is a talent, and dreaming is not something that you can hone. So sometimes we attribute the wrong person or give praise to the wrong persons. The God working out things in your life that is making you a dreamer. So in the passage, Joseph has two dreams. The first dream Joseph has, he's binding sheaves of grain, and his brother's sheaves bow down to his sheep. In the second dream, Joseph is kind of just there, and the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars are bowing down to Joseph. So Joseph tells the dreams to his father and his brothers. And his brothers respond with two questions. Do you intend to rule over us? Will you actually rule over us? The first question of his father is, what is this dream you've had? And the second question is, will I, your mother, and your brothers all come and bow down to you? And that is the initial response of the father and the brothers. The second response is the father considers the matter and thinks about the matter and keeps it in his mind. But the brothers are at the great point of jealousy. The 10 brothers walk away from the encounter. From there, their jealousy builds to hatred. Their hatred builds to murderous thoughts. They throw Joseph in a pit. They sell him into slavery. They lie to their father about his death. And they live the rest of their days, now near a decade or more than a decade, in shame and living a lie. The father walks away from this encounter and he ponders it in his heart. But he also is presented with this reality that Joseph has died. The father takes this to heart and decides to mourn for the rest of his days and refuses to be comforted. Joseph, on the other hand, walks away from this dream. He gets thrown in a pit. He gets sold into slavery. He's accused of rape. He goes to prison. And then after comes his relief. Some may wonder, where is God in all of this? Doesn't he see the pain that Joseph is going through, or the pain of the brothers? God comes from this encounter as the only one who knows the meaning of the dream. God is the only one who gave the dream. And God did it to put somehow his fingerprint on this moment in history, almost as a sign and a symbol. So once they come out of this at the end and they look back and they see the sign and the symbol, they will understand that God is sovereign. God is the one who knew all of these things before any of it even happened. At the very end of the story, the brothers are reconciled, and Joseph is also reconciled with his father. They come and live with him in Egypt, and Joseph is the second highest in the land where he was a slave. But when Jacob dies, Joseph's brothers begin to fear that he will take revenge for what they did to Joseph. And Joseph says this to them: "Do not be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." Joseph is not the main character of this story. God is. What man meant for evil, God meant for good, not just for them, but for everyone. Like Joseph, Jesus was loved by his Father, but also hated by his brothers. Jesus came as a man and suffered many things, right up to suffering by giving his very life. He died a sinner's death so that you and I could be saved. This is what the story is pointing us to. There is no glory in Christ without suffering in Christ. Will you today like Jacob and eventually his brothers, accept God's dream for your life, for you? Will you ask him for his dream for your life? And will you put your trust in him? Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not worried about that now. I just want to do God's will. And he's allowed me to go up to the mountaintop. And I looked over and I seen the promised land. Now I may not get there with you, but I want you to know it tonight. As a people, we will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. Now I'm not fearing anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. New videos out every week.